Hello. Um, I just set my phone so as not to disturb us. Um, Whether you do the same or not is up to you. Um, Hope you're all well. Hope you're safe, taking precautions, and having fun. I'm just out of a lovely hot shower, which is great. Because the last few days I've spent nursing my COVID job, and it's been quite horrible cold and chills and um, just feeling nauseous in general, which brings us perfectly into the mood of the Occupy Camp, Chapter 3. The wind changed direction every few minutes. It rose in speed and dropped and rose again. The temperature went back and forth. Mary slept on while Kat tried to escape the tent, pushing in on herself. A harmless tiny spider fell unnoticed onto her coral jacket. The bright daylight scrunched her brain, and as she exited, she tripped over a rope and almost hit hard soil. She bent over and fixed the peg back into the ground. Jacket hanging from her bony frame like a wing on a moth. Under drowned dye green hair and colliding cosmetics, she recognized the three figures at the gazebo were pretending not to have noticed her near fall. "We survived our first night," announced Leon. "This is the dawn of a new era. Isn't it a great feeling?" "I feel like shite," said Kat. "Do you not sleep well?" asked Gary. "Slept okay. I just don't like waking up to find I've dribbled on my shoulder. I'm only 22. Here, what time is it?" Daniel shrugged. Leon straightened her beret and flicked her long black locks over her shoulder. "It's time to bring the message of resistance to the people. No more, no more El Pasaran." "I reckon that's 9:30, quipped Gary. As if in response, cathedral bells awakened in dull tolls. Kat raised her head. St. Anne's narrowed in span with its height rising to the spire. She looked up the turrets and columns for the belfry. None was found. Dong, 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 dong. "Okay, 10 o'clock, Gary conceded. Leon held a lighter horizontally to the ring of the gas cooker. Before it lit, she'd burned her thumb twice and evoked a trinity of fucks. There were a half-dozen mugs, and Kat found herself complaining about all of them being dirty. Gary apologized and said he'd clean them up. She sat by Daniel and rolled a cigarette. Daniel swept a hand through his chestnut hair, shielding brown eyes from the sun's rays. Like Leon, he dressed all in black, but in stark contrast, he said nothing at all. "Mary will be up soon. The noise of them bells." "Where's Martine?" inquired Kat. "Left. Said she was having back problems. I thought you might have heard her," said Gary. "She was making a point about the male-built environment," said Leon. "I see," said Kat, nodding her head in time with Daniel. Gary called for someone to watch breakfast. He took the kettle to the wall and began scrubbing cups in a basin of shallow, lukewarm water. In its place on the hob, Kat found a pot of baked beans, and on the second ring, rounds of bread in a dry frying pan. "Interesting way to do toast," she said. "You know, in some parts of England they fry their bread in a puddle of oil," said Gary. Kat said that was disgusting, and the others agreed. Teenager Kira Shaw's frizzy ginger hair bobbed over the back of a pale blue raincoat and orange sweater, halfway down to her denim jeans. Marching down the hill with sturdy boots to the camp that afternoon, she found a dozen more curious visitors. Lone activists, whole families, reporters. A pigeon navigated a tent rope as it landed quickly and took off again as a masked anonymite tripped over it. A few feet away, the pigeon hummed with laughter. People were painting signs. There were donations, cutlery, towels, and blankets, and pillows. More than they'd room for, said Mary. Kira talked mercurially with complete strangers. The excitement was there in her sparkling eyes and spread over her freckled cheeks. Mary, by contrast, was overwhelmed with the attention. Weariness pressed down on her bushy blonde eyebrows. Her pale blue jacket stank. The phone battery was dead and annoyed her more than it should have. Gary was well known locally as a community leader and would-be independent politician. His likability had women of all ages fawning over him. There were ladies with plastic Tupperware containers, sealing in cold pasta and soup. They came in their numbers with metal tins full of chocolate and shortbreads. Someone brought them firelighters and a pink basin. Owen and Leon divided their time between helping sort donations and soapboxing to all and sundry, loving the attention the cause had brought and keen to share their knowledge on everything from Reclaim the Night movement to the Spanish Civil War. All eyes turned to the sound of Galway's jeep bumping as it mounted the pavement. He and Gary came with an olive green ridge tent and talked of using half of it to store supplies. They also brought a second gazebo, identical to the first. They were trying to figure out the best way to align the two to provide cover from the elements. Everyone had their take on it. So we roped the new one at the corner with its back to the wall to buttress against the wind, said Leon. No. We don't want our remaining supplies blowing everywhere, said Galway. And visitors were full of enthusiasm for their efforts. I really respect what you're doing. Do you have everything? What are you protesting about anyway? Kat's face lit up when she saw Kira, and she welcomed her back. Mary told him she needed a break from the mayhem, and they offered to join her for a dander around the streets. So they passed the Shack Flats and crossed over by the John Hewitt pub. Signs of the 2008 recession were evidenced in boarded-up small shops and mighty office blocks, dust thick on windows and cracked paint on doors. They stopped by Exchange Place, a curved archway over a tight, dark alley bordered by Printer's Cafe. Kira put her nose against the glass of the tiny closed deli. I wonder if they have that bread with the crusts you can chew on. Practically a sandwich in themselves. Somewhere around here, I think this one used to be the Rape Crisis Centre, said Kat. It was shut down a few years ago. Lack of funding. Mary's damp frayed scarf blew back in her face as she walked with them. She read the letters off the glass front of the spacious photo gallery. Belfast exposed. I got enough exposure last night to do me. She read the sign above the door next to it. What's this? Northern Visions. It's a television station, said Kira. You won't get reception unless you're in Greater Belfast. They're one of those community initiatives. Online too, said Kat. Maybe we can get them to run a feature on the protest. We're near enough we could have our own daily show. Mary laughed. Kat took out a flimsy pocket notebook, clutched it in her palm and scribbled down. What are you writing? Asked Kira. Details. If we're going to do this, we need to reach out to groups across the city, people who can support what we're doing. They rounded the corner to the more opulent Merchant Street. The Rainbow Network around here somewhere, said Mary. Kat paused again to scribble. If you're making a list, maybe we should go and sit somewhere, like a cafe, said Kira. It's Sunday. There's nowhere open, grumbled Mary. They worked their way around to North Street, running parallel with Donegal Street. There were sole traders and small businesses which would have been selling groceries, tattoos, books, and film memorabilia. Weeds grew around the grey shutters of the former North Street arcade. Kat looked up to the red chip paint on the rusted arch and remembered the poetry cafe, record store, and pet shop. She'd been 15 when the arson attack gutted it, and the feelings of the community that dearly loved the arcade. It had remained derelict since. 7 years ago. Bastards, said Kat. My mommy says it was the paramilitaries working for some developer, said Kira. Open secret, said Mary. Someone wanted to bulldoze the whole thing and start again. A few doors down, it was a greasy spoon cafe. Brennan's. The women looked at one another and nodded. Kat led the way along white tiled walls to the hot glass shelf with a lone abandoned sausage. Yellow cardboard cut in star shapes gave prices of some items. The waitress left her perch facing the mounted television. Kat asked for a coffee, and Kira and Mary for a pot of tea between them. Kat bent her frame between the plastic table and chairs bolted into place and took out her pad and pen. We need to reach out to the unions some more. I think that's Gary and Owen. Not Leon, chided Kira. Kat laughed, didn't elaborate. They were all thinking it. The coffees arrived quickly. There's a local Greenpeace group. They'll be no bother tracking down, said Mary. Greenpeace John was there yesterday. With the bike? I met a woman with a bike, said Kat. Mary looked up from rubbing a napkin against a stain on her trousers. That's Greenpeace Deirdre. She's good too. What about Women's Aid? Said Kira. They're based on the Malone Road, nearly 3 miles. The Women's Resource Centre at Queen's would be closer, said Mary. Kat noted the details. It'd be helpful to have contacts at both places. I think there's a woman's shelter on Fountain Street. The coffee disappeared. Kat asked for more. The waitress let Mary out back to use a toilet. Do we have time for another cup? Said Kira. What time's the General Assembly? 7, I think. Kira checked her pocket for a phone and cursed, discovering she'd left it at home. Mary was talking about getting a wee solar charger, said Kat, writing again. Kira put her finger over her lip. Shh. They listened and heard the dull toll of cathedral bells. 6 o'clock, said Kat. The waitress placed their coffees beside them. The Monday morning traffic passed in near roar and rumble over wet tarmac. There were 5 tents. The addition was a 2-man Olive Ridge tent for sharing with supplies, and Mary's blue tunnel 2-man. The second matching gazebo was up, with green and white stripes and strapped to the first. Gary's old electoral poster boards were reversed fuchsia signs with handwritten slogans placed around the square. No house, no job, no fear. Join a revolution, bring a tent, join a protest. The Occupy movement, the 99% bailed the 1% out. We are still losing hospital, A&E, schools and welfare. 99% don't get why the 1% just won't take responsibility. Owen, Kat and Gary were meeting and greeting. Kat happily received another tent and 2 empty 10-litre bottles for water. The man promised chairs and bundles of blankets. One old woman took Owen's hands and pressed a pair of gloves into them. She'd also brought them 15s, coconut and marshmallow tray bakes, wrapped in foil. Kat and Mary had just set these on the trestle table when they saw Ciara. They walked the path to the curb to meet her. Suddenly, unzipped orange tent folds cast Leon kicking into the world. She'd just awoken. Her face was matted and she was dressed how she slept, in black from boots to beret. "Morning, sisters." "Oh, still here?" chirped Ciara. "In the new world of the Amazonian warrior women," exclaimed Leon. She tugged on her own stained sleeve, smelled an armpit and wrinkled her nose. "The Atlanteans, you mean," said Kat. "Martine forgotten us again today?" Mary asked. "Oh, she's very busy," said Leon, zipping up the door. "Good," said Ciara cheerfully. Mary feigned innocence. "You don't like her?" "Bitch was ignoring me, not a word, like I'm invisible." "Maybe she doesn't like gingers," said Kat innocently. Ciara laughed. "Fuck you." They wandered over to the gazebos and sat looking out at the lads pitching the new tent. "Maybe Martine's on the spectrum, like that fella with the laugh," said Kat. "Fucking padrig," growled Leon. "Do you two not get on?" wondered Kat. "He's my downstairs neighbour." Kat raised a painted eyebrow. "Are you two? Are yous?" Ciara chimed in. "She means are yous banging?" "I don't have time for relationships. I'm too engaged in the struggle," said Leon firmly. "Does he ever laugh during sex?" asked Kat. "Okay, stop. I'm going to wet myself," said Ciara. "Padraig Mahon is diametrically opposed to everything we hope to accomplish here. He's an agent of disinformation with no moral guidance." Mary pondered this. "So he's an anarchist?" Owen wasn't much use pitching the tent. He hadn't slept in 2 days and yawned too hard. He'd already slid in the mud. Gary and the quiet lad Daniel caught him before he fell. Owen rubbed his eyes, and when he took his hands away, the bitter old man from before the rally was stood on the path in front of him. He was dressed in the same dark flat cap and black wax jacket. "I warned you this was illegal," he said. He took a deep breath. His face was stern, his brow creased. "Well, as a diligent member of the local community, I've lodged a complaint with the cops, who will be around shortly to have yous lot rounded up." Gary's smile dropped. Owen shook his head and felt his temper rise. The old man took his time to savour their reaction. Then he let out a wicked laugh. "Ha ha ha! Had yous going there? Oh, funny stuff. Really, I'm messing. Don't look so scared." "Right," said Owen, still not sure what had happened. The elderly man wandered off the road, all the while laughing to himself. Joe Duncan was 27, tall with a red checkered shirt and broad shoulders and ripped blue jeans. He was clean-shaven and handsome, with a wise twinkle in his eyes. Owen found him pleasant and unassuming. Gary begged her pardon and went off to Galway's jeep for another supply run. Owen took Joe to meet the others. Hi. Boaty. Yo, how you doing? All right. We at the assembly last night, asked Kat. Wasn't me, said Joe. Owen hesitated. But you're thinking of joining us? Maybe. That's good, Owen beamed. Why is it good? Asked Kira. You might be a serial killer. Leon shuddered. Oh, God. I could be, Joe smirked. Are you planning to murder us in our sleep? Inquired Kat. Joe looked about to say something and then pressed his lips tightly together. Daniel, the quiet Spaniard, gave the biggest grin. Kira put her head down and took out a silver cigarette case. He could be a spy, you know. In the 60s, a tenth of American SWP members were feds, said Leon. Owen nodded. The London Met ran deep undercover agents. Mark Kennedy, Jim Boylan, piece in The Guardian last week. Kira, you're much too young to be smoking. Too late, Grandad. What time is it? Joe checked his wristwatch. 11:15. Shit. Oh, God, said Kat. We've a class to get to, said Kira. They pulled out their bags from Mary's tent and ran across the road to the cathedral and on to the art college. Using Galway John's gas cooker, Owen and Leon enjoyed cups of tea in the midday breeze. Daniel was laying out his clothes in the new tent when he heard John's jeep bump back onto the pavement. A trailer was attached, loaded with a large orange sofa. He helped him hoist it onto the curb before Galway drove off to free up the road. They hauled the three-seater to the gazebo. Why would anyone want to throw this out? Said Owen. You could sleep on it, asserted Leon. Oh, I could, said Owen. On Botanic Avenue, Shea sat on a blanket beside the Spars cash machine. He had a patchwork quilted woolen coat on over a tracksuit. Just 24, Shea had the looks of a teenager. Waves of dark hair mopped around a warm, freckled face. Now the sun had stood down from its midday assault. He sat in a late afternoon grime and shade. He saw the passing trousers, skirts, steady shoes and heels. His own trainers were still wet with the last week's rain. His fingers were hard with the cold and he trembled. Everything hurt. But he'd gotten used to it. Mick and his collie, Murdoch, stopped to see how he was doing. Ah, not so bad, Mick. Keeping her lit. Got my Tato crisps, my board. Here, you couldn't spare us a roll-up. Sure. Would you hold Murdoch a moment? There's a good boy, good dog, said Shea. Aren't you? Who loves you? He loves you. There's a smoke for you, Shea. You want another? Ah, too kind, sir, too kind. A woman joined him. Two women, a pair of arty trainers and drainpipe blue jeans, and cheaper casual shoes with rounder, darker jeans. The sun struck his eyes as he looked up. All right, Shea, said arty trainers. How you doing? Who's that? Och, Cat, darling, and sweet Kira. Didn't know you two knew each other. Small world, aye? Shea took Kat's hand and pulled himself to his feet. Don't bother getting up when I call, teased Mick. Have you dyed your hair again, Kat? Swear it was blue last month. Yep, and here I am, lean green fighting machine. Why the fuck are you out in the streets? Said Kira. Nah, Red. I've got a sofa, or I'm between sofas. The hostel. Forget that, said Kat. Get your stuff. We've got somewhere. Aye? We're camping out as a protest. Spare tents, hot water, food. Here, sounds good, Red. I saw your set up by the cathedral, Mick told him. It's worth checking out, Shea. Okay, I'll have a gander. They said goodbye to Mick and Murdoch and made for Shaftesbury Square Junction. Shea took a decline on his board, casters riveting on the brick path as he glided. The radio piped through the evening mist, moistening the sofa which Owen, Kat and Kira were squeezed onto. Gary and Shea sat on either arm. The 7 o'clock news played on the radio nearby. News International have agreed to pay £2 million to the family of murdered schoolgirl Millie Dowler. There were 20 or so gathered around for the General Assembly. Among those standing, they couldn't help notice a stern old man in flat cap and coal jacket. He seemed unimpressed. His eyes burnt holes through them. Labour MP Margaret Moran is to appear at Southwark Crown Court facing 21 charges. 3 MPs have been imprisoned. Okay, said Owen. Go away. Would you get the radio? Cheers. I'd just like to say well done, all of us. 48 hours, people. Some twinkled and vibrated their hands as per the agreed signal, and others applauded. You may give another round of thanks to Kat and Kira, said Gary. We asked about the art college. It's not agreed yet. We've to speak to security, but they may be willing to let us use the toilets and showers, said Kat. The building's open 24 hours, so fingers crossed, added Kira. The group twinkled their hands again and moved on to talking about getting a marquee tent to provide better cover. Owen had recycled a soup can on the Sunday for a donations jar. There was little in it, but it was a start. Kat wanted a tent for Shea. Perhaps he could share with Daniel. Shea put his hand up and gave a friendly wave. Daniel smiled and nodded. Good, said Gary. Right, we've gotten more press coverage. The Irish Times, the newsletter, Slugger O'Toole, the North Belfast Herald and Post incorporating... Sorry, I can't read that bit. Oh, this is important. There was someone here from Shack complaining about the noise. Owen pointed to the wall 10 metres from them, where rows and columns of windows marked out self-contained flats. So if we could just keep it low, be respectful of our neighbours. Thanks, said Gary. On the subject of our neighbours, the Dean of St Anne's was here. He said we can possibly use a room for meeting if the weather is bad. He said something about giving him some notice, Owen clarified. He's not going to close the cathedral any time soon, remarked Galway. Too bad, moaned Leon. Religion is a weapon of the war on drugs. Mary strained to comprehend. What does that even mean? She began to laugh. Shea chirped up. Drugs are still drugs, though. Kat raised her hand. I haven't eaten. Does anyone want to go halfers on a pizza? I'll chip in a few quid, said Mary. I could do with a bite, Kira admitted. Great. What do you like for your toppings? Oh, for goodness sake, said Galway. A bit of discomfort and you run for the nearest shop. Have you never made use of nature's store? Aye, John, giggled Kira. We should be picking wholesome city berries. Maybe catch a pigeon, put it under the grill. Don't be silly, said Kat. It wouldn't fit. You'd have to pot boil it. Galway harumphed. The good people have donated fresh foods, canned foods. Then, said Kat, when it's tender, slice it into strips. You could grill the skins, said Shea. Get them nice and crispy so as to use them as dishes. Kira dry heaved. I'm going to boke. Will you get a move on? It's bloody freezing out here, someone said. Gary asked who had watched the camp overnight. Owen declined. He said he was beat. Daniel said he would. Then the suspicious old man stepped forward. I'd be willing to help out, he said. His voice was rough and short. Owen poised his pen over the notepad. Okay, name? The leather-faced pensioner had a scowl that never moved. What's yours? Owen? You don't have to tell him, Leon protested. Everyone looked at Leon. What's yours? Asked the old man. Leon? She said timidly, and then confrontationally. Why? The man had a low, deep intonation. Plainly, he said, That's a funny name for a girl. Are you a lesbian? Leon was furious. What if I was? Do you hate lesbians and gays? No, he said. I just wondered why the boy's name. Gary opened his mouth to speak, but Kat beat him to it. I wondered about that too. If I was a lesbian, why would I want a boy's name? I'm named after Leon Trotsky, one of the greatest communists of all time. I see, said the old fella. So you're a tomboy? Tom isn't really a girl's name either, said Owen. Gary clapped his hands together. So, next up, talk of a march on Saturday. Yes, said Leon. I want a visible opposition to the bombing of Palestine, a march focused on human trafficking, and a protest against Edwin Poots. We'll call it Demo Against a Dickhead. We should focus on one thing at a time, Owen cautioned. What about, Kat thought for a moment, if we have a demo on Saturday and follow it with an afternoon bringing people into the camp, like an open house? A day of assembly, said Kira. A carnival of resistance, declared Leon. Most of the group twinkled their hands in agreement. The old man, who would later admit his name was Bob, let it be known the hand-waving looked a bit too weird for his liking. Gary and Owen explained the hand signals to him, but he didn't seem interested. And how do you like that pitch? Occupied is available on Amazon in digital, softback, and hardback, and you can get to it by looking in the description of the video, or if you're going right there now, is.gd/occupy book.